It was fun. I love this sport. I gave it my all. It's fucking crazy. I had a blast, and thank you to all the fans and everyone.
Stop scrolling, because this didn't sound like a retirement announcement. It sounded like a white towel hitting the canvas. One moment the internet was replaying highlights. The next, it was replaying the knockout in slow motion while a single word detonated across timelines. Retirement, Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua, put. Those names in the same sentence, and you already know it's chaos. But when the whispers started that Jake was done after that Anthony Joshua knockout, the boxing world didn't argue. It reacted. Pros, legends, trainers, sparring partners. Everyone suddenly had an opinion, and none of them whispered it. This isn't a loss recap. This is an identity crisis with gloves on. Because when a viral boxing experiment meets heavyweight reality, the outcome isn't just a count-it's-a reckoning. The kind that makes the Kardashians look boring and post-fight interviews feel like therapy sessions. Screenshots flew. Group chats melted. Boxing Twitter went feral. Some laughed. Some nodded. Some said, "I told you." Others said, "Respect for trying." And then came the question nobody wanted to ask out loud. Was this the end or just the loudest cliffhanger yet? Because if this retirement is real, the sport just watched a chapter close. And if it's not, then something even messier is loading. It didn't start with an official statement. Of course, it didn't. This story never does anything clean. It started with a pause. A weird one. The kind that happens after a knockout when the crowd is still screaming but the fighter isn't moving the way everyone expects him to. Anthony Joshua did what Anthony Joshua does. He ended it decisively. No theatrics. No viral dance. Just heavyweight reality crashing into influencer ambition like a brick wall with a license. And the moment Jake Paul hit the canvas, the room didn't just react. It recalculated, because this wasn't supposed to look like that. Jake Paul losing was always on the table. People predicted it. People joked about it. But the way it happened, that changed the temperature. This wasn't learning on the job. This wasn't good experience. This was the kind of knockout that forces uncomfortable conversations in locker rooms. Podcasts and group chats that don't leak on purpose. And then came the silence. No immediate bravado. No cocky tweet. No, "I'll be back stronger." That alone set off alarms. Because Jake Paul never misses a moment to control the narrative. Less, the narrative just punched him in the mouth and stole the microphone. Within hours, the whispers started. Not from fans. From boxing people, trainers saying things like that's the danger of stepping up too fast. Fighters using words like respect in that careful tone that usually means please stop before it gets worse. Old school veterans shaking their heads like they'd just watched a kid touch a hot stove after being warned 10 times. And then the word slipped out, retirement. At first, sounded ridiculous. Boxing Twitter laughed it off. Here we go again. Another fake retirement rollout. This is promo for the next fight. Because in the Jake Paul era, sincerity has been burned so many times, people don't trust it even when it's limps. But the chatter didn't fade. It grew. People started pointing out patterns. How the confidence had changed. How the matchmaking leap wasn't gradual, it was a pole vault. How Joshua wasn't just another name. He was a gatekeeper to a level Jake had never actually stood in before. This wasn't a loss on points. This wasn't a learning curve. This was gravity, and gravity doesn't care about YouTube numbers. The first reactions from boxing pros were brutal in the quietest way possible. No insults, no trolling, just realism. The kind that hurts more because it doesn't need jokes. Former champs saying things like, "There's levels for a reason." Trainers saying, "That's not something you just shake off." Those statements hit harder than memes, because when boxing people stop laughing and start sounding concerned, It means something crossed from entertainment into danger. And that's when the sarcasm got sharp. People joked that this was like trying to speedrun a career mode on expert. Difficulty with tutorial settings turned off. Others compared it to walking into an Avengers movie, thinking you're still in a TikTok skit. The internet replayed the knockout obsessively. Slow motion, zoomed angles, freeze frames. Not to mock, but to understand. Because fans weren't just watching a punch land. They were watching an experiment collide with reality in real time. And reality doesn't do rematches on your terms. The background mattered too. Jake Paul built his boxing run on spectacle, money, and momentum. It worked until momentum met mass. Anthony Joshua isn't a stepping stone. He's a warning sign. The kind that says, past this point, the rules change. And they changed fast. People noticed how the post-fight energy felt off. Not defeated, deflated. Like someone realizing that ambition and consequence had finally synced up. There's a big difference between losing and learning something you can't unlearn. That's where retirement talk gains oxygen, because retirement doesn't always mean I'm done forever. Sometimes it means I just saw the ceiling. And ceilings are terrifying. When you thought you were still climbing, boxing. Pros picked up on that instantly. They talked about reflexes, timing, muscle memory built over decades, not camps. They talked about how heavyweight mistakes aren't forgiving. 1 second late isn't a lesson. It's a hospital visit. That tone spread. Fans who once hyped every move started sounding cautious. Not defensive. Not angry, protective. That's a shift. When supporters stop saying run it back and start saying take time. It means the knockout landed beyond the canvas and still no clear statement. The absence spoke louder than anything. Because if this was just another chapter, the promo machine would have already started. But instead, there was hesitation. And hesitation in combat sports usually means someone's listening to voices they used to ignore. That's how you know this wasn't just another loss. This was a moment that forced everyone, fans, fighters, critics too, asked the same question at the same time. Was this the end of a run? Or the first time Jake Paul realized the sport doesn't care who you are once the bell rings? And the scariest part? The people who actually fight for a living didn't rush to laugh. They nodded. The second wave didn't come from fans. It came from the people whose opinions actually bruise boxing pros. And when they started reacting, the tone shifted from internet comedy to locker room reality faster than a referee's 10 count. Former champs didn't yell. They didn't dunk. They spoke in that calm, surgical cadence that means someone's safety just entered the conversation. You heard phrases like timing gap, defensive liability, and the most chilling one of all, too much, too soon. Those aren't insults. Those are warnings dressed as assessments. Then the clips started circulating. Not highlight reels, analysis reels. Trainers breaking down foot placement. Fighters pausing frames to show where the guard dropped a heartbeat too late. Commentators pointing out how heavyweight power isn't just about strength. It's about inevitability. One mistake becomes a full stop. No edit button. No do-over. And that's when the memes returned sharper, darker, more precise. Not clowning. Commentary. People compared the leap to trying to drive a Formula One car after a weekend at the go-kart track. Others said it was like skipping every season of a show and expecting the finale to make sense. Funny, yes, but the laugh had teeth. The reactions multiplied. Retired fighters with podcasts weighed in. Active contenders chimed carefully, praising courage while quietly circling the same conclusion. This was a mismatch born from momentum, not mastery. The words respect and brave kept appearing, and in boxing language. That's code for please stop before something permanent happens. Public outrage took a strange shape. It wasn't rage at the loss, it was frustration at the path. Fans argued about matchmaking like it was a moral debate. Some accused the sport of letting spectacle outrun sense. Others defended the gamble, saying ambition has always been boxing's fuel. Both sides were loud. Neither side could ignore the knockout. Then the retirement. Rumor hardened. It stopped sounding like a joke and started sounding like a protective instinct. Boxing Twitter, usually allergic to sympathy, shifted into caution mode. The hot takes cooled. The timeline slowed. People asked whether stepping back might be the smartest move a fighter ever makes, especially when the ceiling announces itself with that much force. Celebrity reactions poured in, too. Not endorsements, distance. The congratulatory noise went quiet. The run-it-back crowd thinned. Instead, you've got neutral statements about health, long-term, and next chapter. Translation: everyone felt the weight of that punch. The outrage then turned inward. Fans began debating what this experiment had done to boxing's image. Some said it proved the sport's gatekeepers still matter. Others argued it exposed how money can accelerate risk. The arguments spiraled into think pieces, comparing eras, power dynamics, and the cost of shortcuts in a sport that punishes shortcuts with sirens. And yet, another twist landed. A few respected voices pushed back, not against the knockout, but against the funeral tone. They argued that learning sometimes arrives as a concussion-shaped wake-up call. That stepping away doesn't mean surrender. It can mean recalibration. They reminded everyone that the sport has always had crossroads moments where fighters either pivot or vanish. That split the crowd again. One side said retirement talk was premature panic. The other said ignoring the signs would be reckless bravado. And floating between them was the uncomfortable truth. Both could be right, depending on what Jake Paul wanted: more legacy or longevity. The boxing world hates uncertainty almost as much as it hates mismatches. And this moment delivered both. More analysis dropped. Slow-motion breakdowns went viral. Pros highlighted how Joshua's feints froze reactions, how ring control erased escape routes, how experience compounds pressure until oxygen feels expensive. The deeper the breakdowns went, the clearer it became that this wasn't about hype colliding with hate. It was about craft colliding with consequence. That's when the public outrage peaked, not at Jake, but at the idea of rushing fighters into danger for spectacle. Commentators asked why the leap happened at all. Who said yes? Who waved it through? Who benefited? The questions didn't accuse. They audited, and then still no definitive word. The silence stretched, and silence is never neutral in combat sports. It invites the worst-case scenario to sit in the front row. Fans refreshed feeds. Analysts hedged. Podcasters speculated. Everyone waited for the pivot point where the narrative would finally choose a direction. Instead, it hovered. That hovering did more damage than any tweet ever could. Because hovering suggests consideration. And consideration suggests a line was crossed by the end of the second wave. The conversation wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about limits. About how fast ambition can outrun adaptation. About how heavyweight reality doesn't care how compelling the storyline is once the bell rings. The boxing pros had spoken not with venom, but with gravity, and gravity, once felt, doesn't let you pretend you're weightless again. Whatever came next, retirement, reset, or reinvention, it would land on a crowd that had already learned the lesson. The hard way, the sport had delivered its verdict. Now everyone was waiting to see if the fighter would accept. It tore challenge it one more time. By the time the third wave rolled through, the noise had thinned out, but the weight had doubled. This is the phase nobody enjoys because it's where jokes lose traction and reality starts asking for receipts. The knockout was already old news. The rumor wasn't. What lingered now was consequence. And consequence doesn't trend, it settles. The boxing world moved into assessment mode. Not hot takes, not clips. Real evaluations. People started talking about trajectories instead of fights. Futures instead of rematches. The language changed, and when the language changes, you know something fundamental shifted. Jake Paul's name stopped being followed by punchlines and started being followed by pauses. That's never accidental. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. No explosive interviews. No defiant speeches. Just recalibration. Fighters who rush back after losses usually do it loudly. This time, the volume dropped. And in combat sports, silence often means someone is finally listening to the voices they used to ignore. The reputational impact came next in. It was complicated. On one hand, critics felt vindicated. They said this proved what they'd been arguing all along. Boxing has levels. And skipping them isn't bravery, it's roulette. On the other hand, a strange respect crept in. Not admiration for the outcome, but acknowledgement of the attempt. Trying something this dangerous on this public a stage takes nerve, even if the result is unforgiving. That duality split the audience. Some fans drifted away quietly, exhausted by the whiplash. Others leaned in harder, convinced this moment would define whatever came next. Because nothing binds a fan base like a crossroads. You either walk away or you commit to the long road back. The industry watched closely. Promoters recalculated. Networks hedged. Matchmaking conversations changed tone. This wasn't about hype packages anymore. It was about risk profiles. Because heavyweight knockouts don't just hurt fighters, they spook investors. And when money gets cautious, opportunities narrow. That narrowing was subtle but real. You could feel it in the conversations shifting from who's next to what's safe. Safe isn't a word boxing loves, but it's one it respects after a reminder like this. The sport doesn't apologize, adjusts. Public perception followed suit. The caricature softened into a question mark. People stopped treating Jake Paul like a punchline and started treating him like a decision maker facing an uncomfortable truth. Was this about chasing greatness or about proving something to an audience that would move on either way? That question hung heavy. Legacy discussions began premature, maybe, but inevitable. Not about titles or belts, but about impact. Did this experiment expand the sports audience or cheapen its danger? Did it bring new eyes responsibly, or did it flirt too closely with harm? The answers varied, but the debate itself mattered. It meant the moment transcended a single fight. And then there was the fighter's circle. Training camps aren't just gyms, they're echo chambers. When the people around you stop saying run it back and start saying take time, it's because they've felt the tremor too. Heavyweight reality has a way of clarifying loyalties. It forces hard conversations behind closed doors where bravado doesn't survive long. The audience sensed that shift, even without seeing it. Streaming numbers told a quieter story. Interest didn't collapse. It redistributed. Fans revisited earlier fights, looking for clues they missed. Analysts rewatched exchanges, mapping the exact moment ambition met inevitability. The more they watched, the clearer the lesson became. Shortcuts are loud until they aren't. This wasn't a fall from grace. It was a collision with limits. Limits aren't insults. They're borders, and borders define what's possible next. Some fighters respect them and rebuild. Others crash against them until the sport steps in. The question wasn't whether Jake Paul could fight. It was whether he could adapt. Adaptation is boxing's oldest currency. The public began to accept that whatever the word retirement meant here, it probably wasn't literal. Fighters rarely exit cleanly. But it didn't have to be permanent to be profound. Even a pause can change a career's geometry. Even a reset can feel like an ending when the momentum stops cold. And momentum had stopped. The loudest voices quieted. The sharpest memes dulled. What remained was a collective understanding that something irreversible had happened not to the body, but to the narrative. The story could continue, but it would never sound the same, because once a fighter learns what heavyweight power feels like at its ceiling, they don't unlearn it. This moment didn't close a door. It reframed the hallway. Any return would be measured against this night. Any future fight would be compared to this lesson. Any bravado would be tested against the memory of gravity doing what gravity does best. The sport had spoken clearly, not with mockery, not with mercy, with truth, and truth, in boxing, is the hardest punch to recover from, whatever comes next. Retirement, reinvention, or one more dangerous gamble, it won't be fueled by illusion. It will be shaped by consequence. And consequence is a trainer that doesn't care how famous you are. The bell has already rung. Now the only question left is whether the fighter steps back into the ring with a new understanding, or decides a lesson was final enough. Either way, the experiment crossed a line it can't uncross, and boxing, once again, proved it only has one rule that matters. Eventually, reality gets its round. And if you're still here, congratulations, you didn't just watch a fight recap, you sat through a boxing intervention. So do what must be done and smash that like button like it just talked trash and forgot to keep its hands up. Don't tap it. Don't caress it. Hit it with heavyweight intent. Now slide into the comments, because this debate is far from settled. Was the retirement talk premature panic, or the smartest move anyone's made in this whole experiment? Did Jake Paul hit the ceiling or just discover where the staircase actually starts? Say it loud. Say it reckless. This comment section is the locker room after the bell. And everybody's got an opinion. And if you're not subscribed yet, that's a dangerous gamble. Fix it immediately. Because boxing drama doesn't announce itself, it drops out of nowhere. And when the next shockwave hits at 2 a.m., you'll want to already be here. We don't sugarcoat knockouts. We don't worship hype. We break it all down with context, sarcasm, and zero fear of uncomfortable truths. Share this with that friend who swore Jake Paul would never get touched, or the one who's been waiting years to say, "I told you so." Either way, they'll have something to argue about. Because here at Punch Press, we don't chase highlight reels, we follow the fallout. One punch changes a fight. One loss changes a career. And one night can flip the entire narrative upside down. Today, it's retirement rumors. Tomorrow, it's a comeback tease. And next time, reality collecting interest. Stay sharp. Stay loud. Stay ringside. Punch Press. Loud. Stay ringside. Punch Press.